At my niece's wedding, I was told to help in the kitchen. That's all you're good for. Then my uncle smirked and said, "Don't be dramatic. You're not really part of this family anyway." I said nothing, served dessert, and smiled through it all. They didn't know the venue was booked under my name, and I was about to cancel everything before the first dance. I, 32M, never expected to be standing in a wedding venue kitchen at 9 p.m., holding a tray of desserts while my entire extended family celebrated my niece's big day just 20 feet away. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was the one who made this whole evening possible, yet here I was, relegated to serving duty like hired help. The day started normally enough. I'd driven 3 hours to attend my brother's daughter's wedding, genuinely excited to celebrate with family I rarely saw. I'd even bought an expensive gift and taken time off work. What I didn't anticipate was walking into a carefully orchestrated campaign to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. It began during the cocktail hour when my aunt approached me with that familiar condescending smile. She informed me that they needed extra help in the kitchen and suggested I make myself useful instead of just standing around. The way she said it made my stomach clench, but I nodded and headed toward the back of the venue. In the kitchen, I found myself washing dishes alongside actual staff members who looked at me with confusion. One of them asked if I was part of the catering team, and I had to explain that I was a guest. The embarrassment burned, but I kept scrubbing plates and arranging appetizers on serving trays. My uncle found me there an hour later, sleeves rolled up, hands covered in soapy water. He looked genuinely amused by the sight and told me this was exactly where I belonged, helping in the kitchen because that's all I was good for. When I tried to object, explaining that I was a guest just like everyone else, he waved me off dismissively. Then came the words that would change everything. He smirked and told me not to be dramatic, adding that I wasn't really part of this family anyway. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, holding a wet dish towel, feeling 20 years of subtle exclusions and passive-aggressive comments crystallize into one devastating moment. But here's what my uncle didn't know, what none of them knew. I had booked this venue under my name 6 months ago. See, when my niece got engaged, she and my brother discovered that their dream venue was completely booked. Every weekend for the next year was taken. My niece was heartbroken, and my brother was scrambling to find alternatives. That's when I stepped in. I had connections in the event industry through my business, and I knew the venue owner personally. More importantly, I had the credit score and financial backing to secure the booking when a last-minute cancellation opened up their preferred date. The venue required a significant deposit and personal guarantee, so I put my name on everything. The original plan was simple. I'd handle the booking logistics, and my brother would reimburse me for everything. We'd done similar arrangements before for family events. I never thought twice about it because family helps family, right? But as I stood in that kitchen, my uncle's words echoing in my head, I realized something had shifted. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, scrolling through the confirmation messages from 6 months ago. There it was, clear as day. The venue contract, the catering agreement, the DJ booking, even the florist arrangement. All under my name. All requiring my approval for any changes. I smiled for the first time that evening. Not the forced smile I'd been wearing, but a genuine one that probably looked unsettling given the circumstances. I finished arranging the dessert plates, carried them out to the reception area, and began serving guests with renewed energy. My niece looked radiant as I handed her a piece of wedding cake. She thanked me sweetly, calling me the best uncle ever for everything I'd done to make this day possible. The irony was delicious. Her parents had been treating me like hired help all evening, but their daughter understood what I'd actually contributed. As I moved through the crowd, I started noticing things differently. My brother was holding court near the bar, telling stories about how stressful wedding planning had been and how he'd managed to pull everything together. My aunt was complaining to other relatives about how expensive weddings had become, as if she'd paid for any of it. The DJ announced that the first dance would begin in 15 minutes. I watched my niece and her new husband prepare for their moment, looking nervous and excited. The photographer was positioning lights, guests were gathering around the dance floor, and the energy in the room was building toward this traditional milestone. I stepped outside onto the venue's terrace and called the venue coordinator. She answered immediately because she knew this was a high-profile event. I explained that I needed to discuss some urgent contract modifications. She sounded concerned and asked if everything was all right. This was my moment. I could cancel everything right now. The venue contract clearly stated that any cancellation required approval from the primary signatory, me. The music would stop, the lights would come up, and 150 guests would discover that the fairy tale evening was over. My uncle's words would prove prophetic in the most spectacular way possible. But as I stood there, phone in hand, I heard the DJ introducing the happy couple for their first dance. Through the glass doors, I could see my niece in her beautiful dress, glowing with happiness as her new husband took her hand. This was supposed to be the most magical moment of her life. I realized something important. My niece hadn't done anything to hurt me. She was innocent in all this family drama. Her big day would be ruined not because of anything she'd done, but because of my wounded pride and desire for revenge against her parents. The venue coordinator was still waiting for my response. I told her everything was fine and that the event should continue as planned. She sounded relieved and assured me that the staff would take excellent care of everything. I hung up and walked back inside just as the first dance began. My niece and her husband moved gracefully across the floor while everyone watched with tears in their eyes. It was genuinely beautiful, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders knowing I'd made the right choice. But that didn't mean I was done. After the first dance, I approached my brother near the bar. I told him I needed to speak with him privately about the venue arrangements. He looked annoyed at being pulled away from the celebration, but he followed me to a quiet corner. I explained that I'd been handling all the vendor communications throughout the evening because everything was under my name. He nodded absently, clearly not understanding the implications. Then I told him that several vendors needed final payment authorization before the night was over. His face changed when I mentioned payment. He asked what I meant, and I explained that while he'd been promising to reimburse me for months, I'd actually been covering everything up front. The venue, catering, DJ, flowers, photography, all of it was charged to my accounts with the expectation that he'd settle up later. The color drained from his face as he realized what this meant. He'd been bragging all evening about pulling together this expensive wedding, but he hadn't actually paid for any of it. Worse, he'd been treating me like hired help while I was essentially financing his daughter's entire celebration. I handed him a folder I'd prepared earlier containing copies of all the contracts and receipts. The total came to just over $40,000. I told him I'd need him to handle the final payments directly with each vendor before they left that night, as I was removing my guarantees from all services. He started to protest, saying we could work out the details later, but I cut him off. I reminded him of what his brother-in-law had said to me in the kitchen earlier, about how I wasn't really part of the family. I told him that if that was how they truly felt, then perhaps I shouldn't be financially responsible for family celebrations. The panic in his eyes was immediate. He realized that if he couldn't cover the payments, vendors could potentially shut down the reception mid-celebration. The catering staff could pack up the food, the DJ could stop the music, and the bar could close. His daughter's perfect wedding could become a disaster. I watched him mentally calculating whether he had access to $40,000 on a Saturday night. His credit cards were probably maxed from other wedding expenses, and banks weren't open for emergency loans. He was trapped, and we both knew it. But then I did something that surprised both of us. I told him I would continue covering everything for tonight, but this would be the last time. I would pay the vendors, ensure his daughter's wedding continued without disruption, and everyone could keep celebrating. However, I expected full reimbursement within 30 days, and after that, I was done being the family's financial safety net. He looked relieved, but also confused by my sudden generosity. I explained that I wasn't doing this for him or his wife or her brother who'd insulted me. I was doing it for my niece, who deserved to have her wedding day end as beautifully as it had begun. The rest of the evening passed smoothly. I quietly handled payments with vendors, ensuring everything was settled without any drama. I watched my niece and her husband celebrate, surrounded by family and friends, completely unaware of the crisis that had been averted. My aunt tried to rope me into cleanup duties as the night wound down, but I politely declined and headed to my car. My uncle made some snide comment about me leaving early, but I ignored him completely. Their opinions no longer mattered to me. Update 1. 3 weeks later, my brother called asking for more time to pay me back. Business was slow, he said, and $40,000 was harder to come by than he'd expected. I reminded him of our 30-day agreement and suggested he might need to take out a loan or sell some assets. He became defensive, arguing that families should be more flexible with each other. I found his sudden interest in family loyalty amusing, considering how I'd been treated at the wedding. I told him the payment deadline stood. 2 days before the deadline, he called again, this time with my aunt on the line. She tried to guilt me into extending the payment period, saying I was being unreasonable and vindictive. She reminded me that family was supposed to support each other through difficult times. I asked her if she remembered what her husband had said to me at the wedding. She claimed not to recall the specific conversation, but I reminded her about the kitchen comment and the remark about me not being real family. I told her that her husband had been right. I wasn't really part of their family, which meant I shouldn't be expected to provide them with interest-free loans. The payment came through on day 29, wired directly to my account. No note, no thank you, no acknowledgement of what I'd done to save their daughter's wedding. Update 2. 6 months later, my niece called me directly. She'd apparently discovered the truth about who had actually paid for her wedding. She was mortified that her parents had treated me so poorly while I was covering the entire cost of her celebration. She apologized profusely, saying she'd had no idea about any of it. She thought her parents had saved up for years to pay for the wedding. Learning that I'd been relegated to kitchen duty while simultaneously financing the entire event made her feel sick. She wanted to know if there was anything she could do to make it up to me. I told her there wasn't, and that I didn't regret helping her have a perfect wedding day. She was the innocent party in all of this, and I was glad I'd been able to contribute to her happiness. But I also told her that she should understand something about her parents and extended family. They were quick to take advantage of generosity while simultaneously diminishing the person providing it. I suggested she be careful about financial entanglements with them in the future. She asked if I would consider attending her first anniversary party next year. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I probably wouldn't. Not because I was angry with her, but because I was done pretending that her parents and I had a functional relationship. Update 3. A year later, my brother needed help with another family event, his son's graduation party. He called asking if I knew any good caterers and whether I might be willing to help with booking a venue. The audacity was breathtaking. I told him I was sure he could handle everything himself, just like he'd claimed to do with the wedding. He got frustrated and accused me of holding grudges, saying that family was supposed to forgive and move forward. I reminded him that his brother-in-law had been very clear about my status in the family. I told him I'd taken that feedback to heart and adjusted my level of involvement accordingly. If I wasn't really family, then I shouldn't be expected to solve family problems. The conversation ended with him hanging up on me. My niece sent me photos from her anniversary dinner, and she looked genuinely happy. Her marriage was strong, and she was building her own life independent of the family drama. That made me feel good about the choices I'd made. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually canceled everything that night. The nuclear option would have been devastating but satisfying in the moment. Instead, I chose a longer game that ultimately taught everyone more valuable lessons. I learned that being the family problem solver had been enabling bad behavior for years. They learned that generosity has limits, and that treating people poorly has consequences. Most importantly, my niece learned to be more aware of family dynamics and financial manipulations. I still get occasional calls from various relatives when they need something. I politely decline and suggest they reach out to someone who's actually part of the family. It's amazing how quickly they remember my existence when they want something, and how easily they forget it when deciding who deserves respect. The whole experience taught me something valuable about boundaries and self-respect. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't the dramatic gesture you could make, but the quiet decision to stop enabling people who don't value you. I may not have gotten the immediate satisfaction of watching their faces when the music stopped, but I got something better, my dignity and peace of mind. Looking back, I'm proud of the man I was that night, standing in that kitchen, choosing to take the high road while still protecting myself. That's the kind of person I want to be. Someone who can be generous without being a doormat. Someone who helps others without losing himself in the process. And if they ever need a caterer recommendation again, they'll have to find someone else to ask.